everybody. Welcome back to the Healthy, Wealthy, and Smart YouTube channel. I am your host, Dr. Karen Litzy, owner of Karen Litzy Physical Therapy, located in the heart of New York City. Now, today's episode, I'm really happy to have a fellow physical therapist on. Dr. Frazee is an executive life coach and leadership mentor to professional women. She's the creator of the revolutionary Somatic Attunement method in Attuned leadership, and the soon-to-be published author of her first book, Revive, The Working Woman's Unexpected Guide to Recovering from Burnout. She's gone from healthcare leadership, like I said, she's a fellow physical therapist, to entrepreneurship to teach women how to build a career and a life of their dreams without sacrificing sustainability or satisfaction, using what she calls body wisdom. And in today's episode, we talk about all that stuff. We talk about what does sustainability mean when it comes to being an entrepreneur? How do you avoid burnout? How do you even recognize burnout when it's happening? All these things are so important, especially as women, especially being an entrepreneur. And so we talk about what she calls attuned leadership and how that can help decrease the likelihood of burnout. So you guys, it's a great episode if you are female entrepreneur, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling like I cannot take on one more thing, I'm dying here, I really need some help, this is the episode to listen to. Crystal is amazing. She's kind. She's lovely. She lays everything out in a way that's so easy to understand. If you want to learn more about Crystal and how to work with her, all of her info is right underneath this video in the notes section. So just go on there, click on there, find her, reach out to her. Thank you so much to Crystal, and thank you guys so much for listening. So let's get started. Hey, Crystal, welcome to the podcast. I'm happy to have you on to talk about burnout, closing the gender gap. And just as an FYI, I was like teetering on the edge of burnout like last week. So this is gem of a timing here. So thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I am really excited to share this with you and with all the listeners.
Yeah. And I know a lot of listeners are physical therapists. You are a physical therapist by trade and training. And before we get into things, would you mind telling the listeners just a little bit more about how you made that transition from full-time physical therapy to maybe part-time to maybe full-time again to now more full-time coaching? Because I think a lot of people are interested in that.
Yes. So I became a physical therapist after being already in the wellness field. So I was already a yoga teacher and very interested in alternative healing, like getting trained in mindfulness-based stress relief and various stuff like that. And so then I thought PT was the next logical step, get my doctorate, have my own practice. So while I was in PT school, that was my intention the whole time. However, my first job was in leadership. I was a director of rehab in a chronic pain facility in Dallas. Enjoyed that, but decided to leave the Dallas area, moved to a new area that was a little more rural and had less sort of urban opportunities. And that's when I thought, oh, this is the chance for me to have a wellness center. Let me try to, bring everything together. So I had a job as an orthopedic physical therapist, but I also had like brick and mortar practice where I was acting as a yoga therapist, a wellness coach. I had already completed certifications in health coaching with an interest in women's health and did that for a while until it gets ridiculous. I live in Michigan and, I'm getting up at 5:30 to go shovel the snow, to see a couple clients, then to change clothes, to go see patients, to come back at lunch, to teach a class, to go back to the clinic. I mean, it really got kind of hairy for a little while. And then I had children. And that really just pulled everything into perspective here. Like, what am I doing? How do I want to spend my time? It's so precious to be away. The money I was spending on daycare, what do I want to do? And I just slowly over a number of years decreased my hours and you just moved more into my own practice. And I had a practice full-time. I left clinical work. It was called Mindful Pain Relief. And I was focused on helping women with chronic pain conditions. And it was was a lovely experience, but I found that women, even though I was saying, I'm a specialist from all of these directions, I can help you with your pain, this is what I need you to do, they weren't able to give the time and the energy and invest it in themselves. And I've certainly helped people and they had great results. But then there were people who weren't moving forward. And even with my coaching skills, I just had this feeling there was something deeper. And that was sort of the wake up call when I shifted from really like the PT and the wellness hat, right, of all of that experience, and shifted into more of a professional woman, the executive type of personality, and really going, what is it that stops women from doing what they need to take care of themselves and prioritizing that? So that's 2018. So I'm focused on that full time now, growing that as my coaching practice. And then unexpectedly, I was the sole provider for the family. So I full-time had my own like consultancy, my own agency coaching, and also went back into healthcare and full-time in healthcare with 2 children under 5. And, this is just like before COVID.
Right.
So it was a pretty intense little road. And through that, I experienced my own burnout. How could you not, right?
Yeah.
But I had a methodology that I had been using through all of the years that I had been forming and crafting. And when I was recovering from my own burnout, I really got to put that to a test. And that really lit my passion and, lit the clarity of, I have all the tools in my tool bag. I don't need any more credentials. I don't need any more letters. I don't need any more things. I see the root cause of the reason why the women I was working with before weren't able to, get the results that I wanted them to get, even though I was handing it to them on a silver platter, because I also had the same troubles allowing it to myself, and it was that real personal example. I literally sat up in bed one night and was like, it's the good woman rebellion. Like all the things that I've been taught about being a good woman and even a good clinician, it's all related, are the reason why I'm in burnout right now. And that led me to quit healthcare again and focus again on my own practice. So, I've always thought it's been really nonlinear, like how I get to this place. But now when I
is anything ever linear in life?
Right. It all makes sense.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's all primed me so well, the personal life experience and just all the challenges.
Yeah, that's a lot to go through in a short number of years. It's not like we're talking 2 or 3 decades here. That was like less than 10 years,
Right.
So that's a lot. And then it kind of reminds me of something that you talk a lot about, and that's sustainability. So how do you sustain yourself through all of those times? So I think it's interesting to speak about sustainability in the lens of burnout. So how do those two intertwine?
Yeah. So I think we have to go back. We have to go all the way back to the beginning. I'm from the South. I'm from like rural Alabama and Georgia.
Okay.
And then I've moved all over. But, my upbringing is in a really traditional gendered sort of roles that I was brought up with. And for me, that looks a certain way. And for you, that looks a different way because of your community culture and your family of origin. But as women, as anyone identifying as a female, we've all been exposed to what I've called the perfection paradox. And that's that there's so many double binds and there's so many sort of like formulaic expectations of you'll be, pretty, polite, kind, nurturing, selfless, attentive, because I'm from the South, we'll throw in like obedient and selfless. But, I feel like that shaping of our identity shows up. And especially those of us who decide to be healthcare providers, caregivers, we're more empathic. We are more primed to be sacrificing our own needs and not listening to our body to like prioritize somebody else and something greater than ourselves. So yeah. And then in your own workplaces, I feel like as you're developing as a young professional, the places that I worked, the leadership of those organizations modeled that. And I wasn't seeing anyone really show good capacity and good sustainability and good boundaries and good work-life integration in a way that I wanted to model. I saw the opposite. And so, yeah, I mean, I think when we want to work towards sustainability, first we have to go back and like surface why it's hard. Because for women, what I've experienced is so many of them are like, what's wrong with me? Like Karen can have a practice and a podcast and do all the things. So why can't I? Right. And the truth is there's nothing wrong with any of us. Like we're set up to try to do all the things. And then when we try to do all the things and it actually costs us personally of our health and our quality of life, then we feel shamed and like we're doing something wrong. So it's such a paradox. So that's a big one, you know?
And also when you're in that situation, you don't want to admit it.
Oh no,
I'm overwhelmed,
absolutely.
especially women, right? We have to be strong and we have to show that we can do all the things. But I think the first step out of burnout is to admit I can't do this.
Oh yeah.
I can't do
For
it.
sure. Right.
Have a breakdown if necessary.
Right.
I can't do this and I
Right.
need help. And that can
Right.
be with a trusted friend, it could be with a trusted group.
Right.
If you're with like I'm in an entrepreneurial group of all
Right.
women, of course. We opened
Yes.
it up to the full group, but only the women said yes. Shocker.
Yes.
And everybody was going around and kind of talking about like, let's give a number to our personal life and a number to our professional life and to kind of gauge where we're at and then talk about what's going on and then what you need help for. And I was like, I need help.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
was like, I can't,
Right.
like, I feel like I'm a 2 in personal and a 5 in professional
Right.
on a scale of 1
Right.
to 10. Like I even said, I'm like, I feel like I'm walking a razor's edge on burnout and just like I had a breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
But it with a trusted group of people. And
Yes.
even just since admitting that, it's like, I actually feel better. And I can find the
Right.
time to go to the gym, or I can find 5 minutes here instead of just thinking
Right.
I have to do this,
Right.
this, and this, and
Right.
realizing, and we'll get to this, but you have to say no to things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And unfortunately, where you're at is on the edge. You're on the brink of something you don't want. And
Mhm.
we've been told our whole lives, like this generation, I'm in my 40s, I can be anything I want to be. I can do anything I want to do, except I've never seen another woman do that. My role models weren't doing that. They
Mhm.
weren't trying to do what I'm doing. They weren't working full time, raising high demand children, still trying to do all of the things. It just looked really different. And I don't have any family support, like they're across the country,
Right.
and so it really is interesting that, I mean, all the women I've worked with, of course, like they wait until something is imminent. There is a health crisis. They're in the emergency
Mhm.
room.
Mhm.
There's been a relationship challenge or their job is on the line. Their performance is tanked and now there's a consequence. So
Right.
I hope that like as we learn more about this, we can, spread the word and at least the next generation, they realize it earlier, right? And so I think, that recognizing how that like what is the driver, right? Instead of moving away from pain, the painkiller of I don't want to be in burnout, like I feel
Mhm.
crappy and I'm not happy, like whoa, why don't we respond way sooner? And hopefully throughout the conversation people will get like little tidbits of how they can do that. If we talk about like sustainability, we really try to get really like practical with what is that anyways,
Mhm.
what does that even mean? I have a little formula that I use and it's called the capacity cascade.
Okay.
And basically, when we try to understand what capacity is, I try to make it as simple as possible. Like capacity, we think of as volume, it's how much you can produce, it's how much you can do.
Mhm.
But really, for us right now, let's say capacity is performance. It's your performance. And, I want to be a high performer. I want to be able to do all the things really well. And I'm sure our listeners are too. That's why they're listening to learn and grow to your show. But, capacity, if we're not really working on management of stress and responding to stress in our lives, then performance decreases. And that's, acute stress is great. It helps us think on our feet, navigate in traffic, and show up as our best in the moment. But chronic stress, obviously, we all know as healthcare providers, has like a cumulative negative effect and performance declines, right? And so the first thing is to really understand not how to spend an hour to go to yoga class, but how to take 30 seconds to do something that quote unquote like closes the stress cycle, where you're actually processing stress chemicals out of your body, not once things get really intense, but all the time, because you know that your life is highly demanding already. Right? We're not waiting for signs of a headache or whatever happens for you, listeners, like with high levels of intense ongoing stress, but you just know it's there. And so every day throughout the day, many times you're doing something. And you've heard of things like shaking your hands and bouncing up and down if you're standing, or humming, or right, all the things that might help regulate the nervous system, which, we can dive in if that's interesting. But, I really think we have to just shift our mindset from responding when the alarms are going off to making it a part of our life so that we don't even hit that point.
Right. So learning to be proactive versus reactive.
Right.
And so what other hints do you have as little like proactive capacity snacks we can take throughout the day versus saying, well, I don't have 20 minutes. I don't have an hour. Like you said, I don't have an hour. How am I supposed to do that?
Nobody has an hour.
Right. So
I haven't had an hour in a long time.
Yeah. So what advice do you have for the listeners? Little kind of things they can do throughout the day to help turn the volume down a little bit on the stress and the nervous system.
Well, it really is all about the nervous system. I mean, I think like a really, good resource would be Deb Dana's book, which is Anchored, and it's about befriending your nervous system using polyvagal theory. And really that's just saying, the polyvagal or the vagus nerve is the nerve that, it's like the gas and the brakes of your nervous system, and you're, responding to it in the moment. But, simple things that have been, well researched and shown to make a difference would be like that shaking, humming, screaming in a pillow or in your car, something called havening, which I know you all can't see me, but I'm slowly rubbing my palms
it'll be on YouTube, so people can go over to YouTube and watch it. Yes.
So, just a simple touch, and it doesn't have to be weird. Like I can be in a meeting and nobody has to know that I'm doing anything with my hands. Right. And that's very grounding. And really what you're thinking of is cueing to your system that you are safe. Because when we're in ongoing continuous stress, it's our internal system is saying, I'm not safe. And you're pumping out the cortisol and the adrenaline, and it's taking a toll. So, I mean, those are some kind of practical things. And when you have so there's a bell curve, where you have stress on the bottom axis and performance on the vertical axis, right? And that's the bell curve. And acute stress is in the middle. And you can manage your stress level so that it stays there. And if stress continues, performance goes down, right? If stress increases. And I realize my video is mirrored, so it would look opposite.
I think people get the picture. Yeah.
They get the picture. And, so using these techniques is just basically to keep you in the middle of the bell curve, right? And then when you can do that, then you show up and you're able to do what you set out to do, right? You show up and you have a regulated nervous system, and you're able to co-regulate with your patients. You can influence your coworkers. You're showing up and you're actually shifting the dynamic of the entire space, right? Like my clients would be like, oh, I've reached all my goals and we're coming to an end, but what am I going to do without my dose of you? Right. And that's the power that we can have. That's what influence is. And from there, then we started to get recognized. Like people actually notice the work we're doing and the effect we're having. And they're not sure exactly what it is necessarily, but it increases validation, right? More invitations to sit at the table. And then you have more confidence because of that. And because you're getting this reinforcement and this positive feedback, now you're more satisfied. And when, especially women, are more satisfied with the amount of effort we're putting in and we're getting validated back, now we're sustainable,
Yeah.
right? Because we have to have that.
And I mentioned this earlier in our conversation, but how about saying no? So I know I tend to say yes to things. I'm like, yeah, I can probably do that. Yeah, I can do that. I think that's part of what was my sort of higher levels of stress over the last couple of weeks. But how do we say no without feeling guilty?
Right.
Or without then having FOMO.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So how do we do that? What are some good ways to do that?
Well, I have maybe a long way to answer that, because there's a big section there that if I just answered that, we would be missing. And that is something I call body wisdom. And that is like certain emotions have like a signature in your body, which is maybe different than how I experience it. But let's take the feeling of anger, right? When I'm angry, I feel it in my jaw, in my throat, in my chest. I get tense. Like it's the same thing. It's repeatable every time. When I feel joy, it's more of a like a lightening and a smile on my face, etc. Right? And your no actually has a feeling in your body that you can get to know, right? You're like, I'm drinking water. Do I want bubbly water or still water? I'm going to have still water. Is your body saying yes or no, right? You can just start to do very simple things. The phone is ringing. Do I want to answer it? Yes or no, right? So to understand when you actually have a no that's embodied is important, because we live in our heads and we're not listening to our bodies at all, which is largely how we get ourselves into situations of burnout, right? Because our mind is going to say, you can do that. Say yes. Keep going. You're fine. Like, it's going to minimize anything else. And of course, you have a vision in your mind of what you should be able to do. And you have the ingrained unconscious programming of the perfection paradox. So, I think that's really important just to highlight for people to listen to their own body and to stop and say, what does my body have to say about this? Like the body keeps score,
Right.
And then from there, if I have so many people who would say like, somebody asked me if we could add a meeting and I said, no, it doesn't work for my schedule. I've got obligations. And they pushed and pushed and pushed. And then it turned into, but you're the only one, but we really need your input, and then they ended up saying yes. And then immediately they just felt it all, right? The regret, the remorse, they felt sick. They were pissed at themselves. They knew they had violated their own boundary. Their body was telling them long before that, but they didn't respond. And, that's one of the things I learned early on in mindful pain relief, right? Is the overgiving, the overworking. And it's so prevalent in the industry of physical therapy and like medicine in general. It's like, don't take a lunch, chart on your own time. Unpaid, right?
Oh, yes.
It's just a recipe for tune out what your body says because we don't care, right? And we have to sort of somehow balance that and find ways to repair the impact of that to our systems, So those are sort of, I always go back to like, what's really at play here? And then if we're still talking about like, how do you say no, it's you recognize, you pause before making a decision. You bring your body into the decision-making process. And then if your body says no, that's all you need, right? Like that's the most powerful affirmation that you need versus what are they going to think of me? Like all of the external expectations that we evaluate. Will they be disappointed? Will this, all of that over analysis is so much energy. Capacity is energy, attention, and time. It's all we have. It's so precious.
Right.
So when you think, listeners, you want to say no, really, that's all it is. I think the most important thing is to start practicing in really intense, low threat situations, just saying no without an apology and without a reasoning. Like, experiment without needing to validate your reason for saying no. Women are notorious for being unworthy of their no, because they're expected to be sacrificial and like selfless and giving and nurturing and just do it anyways. And, it's like someone's like, would you be able to do this? And you're like, I'm sorry, I'm not available to do that. And then it's just a period and then a pause.
Right.
And they can respond, and then you respond to that. And so it's really just starting to change that piece of your identity where you start to practice, I am a person that gets to honor my body's no. I'm a person that gets to say no without feeling like I have to defend it. Yeah.
That's the key, where you don't have to defend it. Because isn't it always like, we're always like, oh, I can't because I have to do this and I can't do this and I have to. And I remember I took a public speaking class a number of years ago with a woman named Trisha Brook, and she had the best no. And she was like, I'm going to share the no with you. And she said it just stops conversation. She rarely has someone challenge it. She would say, oh, thank you so much for thinking of me, or thank you so much for offering this opportunity. It's just not a good fit for me right now.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And I've used them, and people are like, okay. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I can say no. And I want to also circle back on that concept of boundaries. So what advice do you have for people, especially young clinicians, whether in the medical field, whether they're physicians, physical therapists, dietitians, occupational therapists, for young healthcare workers? How do you go about setting your boundaries, but still, because you feel like, well, I don't want to set my boundaries too tight because I want to advance. I want to get to this position up here, or I want to be a director, or I want to, I don't know, be a physical therapist for the Knicks or for the Yankees or something. You got very New York centric here. Philadelphia Eagles. And so I can't, as a new professional, you might think, well, I can't set my boundaries that tight. I'll just go to someone else and I'll be skipped over. So what advice do you have on setting boundaries, and how can people do that?
So if it's okay, I'm going to touch on the concept of attuned leadership. So, for listeners, that's just what I call the work that I've created that I do with working professionals. So traditional leadership doesn't address these challenges that women face that we've been talking about. And, it focuses on, in healthcare leadership, it's focusing on team building and conflict management and, just like more business acumen and profitability and, these days DEI and stuff like that. But it doesn't address any of the stuff that so far we've been talking about. And, I think that there's something specific for women, even though most, like, we think of nursing, we think of physical therapy. I mean, it's female dominated, right? You've got more females than males. So it's really interesting that it's still so prevalent. And so we're going to look back there. We're going to point back to the perfection paradox and also acknowledge that you're moving into this profession because you already are vulnerable to overgiving, but there's the likability trap that starts pretty early on. You're thinking of adolescence, high school, wanting to be accepted, right? Then you move into your professional world and you start to realize that powerful, strong women are labeled bossy, bitchy, and right, there's this back talk about them. And, the likability trap is similar to like Goldilocks syndrome is another term, right? If you're too warm and you're really likable, everybody, is like, oh, she's really great. She's our friend and, we want her to be a part of all of this, but she actually doesn't have what it takes. And you're not going to move up. You're not promotable, right? Because when you're too warm, you are more likely to say, oh, I'll do that. And I can do that. And I can do that. And you become indispensable because so much is on your shoulders. Now you're more stressed and what you're producing is not as awesome. and your capacity potentially is going to go down, right? And then on the other hand, you worry about being too cold, being seen as too cold. It's all perception. And in that case, you ruffle too many feathers and you're too much and you need to tone it down. And and that's the other side of it, is where you're too strong and others feel, threatened by that. Men and women, actually. The studies show that females have a similar response to assertive female leaders as well. So our leaders really need ways to navigate that. And so do our new grads and young professionals. All of us need ways, to do that. So I think first, just to acknowledge that that's there. That's why we have, only like 30% of women are in executive positions and only 5% are women of color. And, that's why right now a third of women are considering downshifting or leaving the labor force altogether, right? It's like this critical time where, I don't know, I feel like it's so powerful, especially for new professionals, to realize the situation they're in and to know that the way to move up, if this organization is worthy of their time, energy, and attention over the course of these years they're about to dedicate, that it is by listening to their own bodies and really valuing that as the most superior wisdom there is, more than an expectation that's external to them. Because believe it or not, and I've been in an organization for 10 years and then later on went, why'd I do that? You can move laterally and you can move vertically, right? What you really want to do is decide, what is your zone of genius? What is it you do that you show up and it's awesome? And how can you stay in that lane and do that thing and then be consistent and advocate for your own visibility, right? So you're like, you can be annoying about it, right? I did this for a period of time before I became a director at one of the places I worked. I was like, hey, I spent extra time and I did this, this, and this, and these were the outcomes. And that's related to the business goals. Just want to make sure that you're aware of that. Like, we're not doing invisible work. So I think that those boundaries, you really have to be clear about what can you actually provide and how is it going to move you forward, not how is it going to fulfill the expectations on you. So for me, I made some boundaries that was like, I don't volunteer on the weekends if it's unpaid. The answer is no. I'm not available for that. My priority is my family. I do a great job in the hours that I am here, and you can count on that. Right. I just created some boundaries for myself that I needed through, early family life and children and that whole part there. So, I think the boundaries are basically your standard. What standard are you going to tolerate? What are you worthy of? And that's all you're doing, is you're just communicating that clearly, calmly, without needing to defend it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. So it's a lot to think about for new professionals. And I think the other part of that is you have to know what you do, why you do it, who you're impacting, what are your values, and what kind of an impact do you want to have? And these are hard questions. This is not something that you answer in 5 minutes. This may take days, weeks, months to really hone down on who you are as a professional within your space, within your home, within your professional space. And so I think everything that you just said about how to say no and how to set up boundaries, like that takes time. So just for the listeners out there, it's not like you're going to poof and okay, this is who I am, what I do, why I do it. This is my impact. These are my boundaries. This is so I can say no. It all takes a little bit of time, but as a new professional, the sooner you can work that out for yourself, the better, versus 10, 20 years fast forward and you're like, I've never done any of this work.
Absolutely. The sooner, the better. And it is growth, but you'll learn. I mean, I think good guideposts early on are anger and resentment, right? I mean, resentment is basically anger grown up. But,
Mm-hmm.
when you start to feel like you're investing your time and energy in ways that then make you angry or resentful, you've missed your body wisdom, and your body has been communicating messages. You've overridden it, you've pushed through.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying yes when you should say no. And I mean, that's a skill that I think, start listening out for that for the younger ones. But this is why my clients are later on in their career, and they've done the
Right.
building, and they're saying, hey, how I got here is not how I'm going to now get where I want to go. I'm not willing to do this anymore. I've got success and I'm not satisfied. What am I going to do now?
Right.
Or they've hit burnout and they're like, whoa, it's not sustainable. So
Yeah.
I think, yeah, early listeners, it's a chance to prevent that. And if you're later in your career, it's still not too late. You can totally make these
Yes,
changes.
there's hope out there. So uh, there's hope. So as we begin to wrap things up, what are your recommendations for listeners to improve their sustainability and their life and their
Mhm.
happiness and everything that's wrapped up around it?
Well, I think it's okay to say, like, if you're a high achiever and you have a lot on your plate, I want to say that's all right. I'm not one of these self-care people that's like, oh no, you're doing too much. You've got to have all this downtime. I think it really is learning about your own nervous system and how, if you have to push more, like for me, when I had 2 jobs and 2 kids, 2 little kids, how can you do what you need to do and also build in the practices for your physiology, at the most fundamental level of hierarchies, Maslow's hierarchy of needs here, having support and taking care of your basic needs for nutrition and sleep and all of that stuff, closing the stress cycle so that it has as minimal effect as it can. I mean, that's like the first step. If you try anything else, you can go hiking, you can go to yoga, but if you don't have that first step figured out, it's not going to matter. It doesn't matter. And then when you have that first step figured out, well, then we've got the other things that we can do. So I don't know. I really would love to say, start with body wisdom, start listening to your own body and noticing
Mm-hmm.
what messages it's giving you, because it's talking. I promise. It's already talking to you. And then start to learn more about your nervous system and simple things you can do. I mean, the things I give my clients don't add to their to-do list. They're fitting in moments that are already available. And then once they start doing them, it's hard not to do them, right? Because you feel the improvement. There are some things that you can do with your schedule and how you're spending your time. For that, I do have a freebie that I'm offering the listeners. It's called How to Run Your Day Without It Running You. It's very, very applicable and practical. So, if that's an area where you think you could be supported, grab that. But yeah, also, know the difference between being able, like, I can do something and I should do something. Like, there's a phase of my life where I can identify that when someone would be like, oh, I really, I'm having trouble with this thing and I just wish I could figure this out. And I knew that I could help them. It would be like a tingly excitement.
Mm-hmm.
It would be like dopamine was going off, right? And I had to learn to identify that and then inside rectify that in this moment. I don't have that to give,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I could point them to other resources. I could support them
Right.
on their journey. I can do it, but I shouldn't, right? I'm going to, right, boo, over the curve, and my performance and capacity are going to go down. And I'm working on building that and keeping it.
Right. Right.
So, yeah, hopefully those are helpful.
Oh, very, very helpful. I'm listening very intently. But yeah, I think that's all incredibly helpful. And just so the listeners know, we'll have a link to the download How to Run Your Day Without It Running You in the show notes on any platform that you may be listening on right now. That is in the show notes on that platform. So it is there. One click will take you right to it. Well, I have to say this was great. I was, like I said, listening intently because I'm kind of probably was teetering. It was now I feel a little bit better this week as opposed to last week, which is really great. Not that the listeners need to know I don't know, maybe it's TMI. Is it too
I
much
think it's good.
information?
No, it's relatable.
Yeah.
Right. It's real.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you were in the beginning when you were like, well, Karen has a business and a podcast. How is she doing all this? Like, she's not.
Yes. Yes.
That's
46% of women right now are reporting burnout as of 2022. So 46%.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's
And
big.
it's more than like, I gotta take a vacation.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't work. You come back
It's
to the
more than that.
same
Yeah,
patterns
yeah, yeah.
and they're inside us. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to make a change and you've got to know and listen to your body. And it's so true. I'm gonna be much more attuned
Yay.
to my body and to how I feel, and when I say yes, no, when something doesn't feel good and when it feels good. And also, over the past week I've taken I always go back to my mission and my values and my impact statement. And does this opportunity that is coming to me, does this align with those things? And if it doesn't, then it's a no.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
a confident no. So it's my
Absolutely.
2 cents.
Yeah.
Just my 2 cents on that. So listen, where can people find you?
Well, my website's crystalfrazee.com and all my social media handles are at Dr. Crystal Frazee. And I hang out most on LinkedIn and Instagram. So find me there.
Perfect.
A little more down to earth and behind the scenes over on TikTok if you prefer that kind of message. So yeah, we'd love to connect with listeners. And if you have questions, Attuned Leadership is a 4-part methodology, and I've also written a book that's coming out later this year on recovering from burnout. So, if you have a more specific question, please shoot it to me. I will make a video and tag you in it or message you privately and let you know that I've shared it. But I would love to help listeners take what they've learned here and, push it one more step. And I just want to say, in regards to the body wisdom, if it's hard for you, just know that that's okay, right? That's just affirmation of how professional we've gotten at tuning it out, like how good we've gotten staying in our head and disregarding it. If you can't hear your body's messages at all, then the strategy I would give you is to listen to your body's argument. When you're like, oh, I'm so tired, I should just take a little break. There's a little voice, imagine like a little character on your shoulder, and it says something to you. And it probably says the same thing every time. And it's from very early in life. And so the sooner you can recognize it, right? That's one of the big steps to starting to be able to listen to your body, is to understand the script of like, just suck it up. You're the only one here. You got to just do it. Just keep going, right? Whatever it is, whatever it's saying. That could be, an alternative. If actually hearing the body's messages of what it's saying, you might actually be able to hear words instead.
Yeah. And I know that little voice. I hear it often, and it usually is, oh, suck it up, or, oh, just keep going. Again, not doing that as much anymore. What's the name of your book?
It's Revive, the Working Woman's Unexpected Guide to Recovering from Burnout.
Nice.
The seed of everything that I've created over the past decade is the Somatic Attunement method, and it has 4 parts. And the book is taking you through a framework specifically for burnout. And then in Attuned Leadership, it's that framework specifically for, you have success and you're working on maintaining that while also building in more satisfaction and sustainability. For the listeners, just know, if you're thinking and saying to yourself, just push through because once I have success, then I'll be satisfied. It doesn't work like that.
Nope.
Your life is too precious. So start now.
No, it does not. Thank you so much. Now, before we leave the discussion, last question I ask everyone is, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self, knowing where you are in your life and in your career?
That is such a beautiful question. And I love that you ask that. And there's so many things. I have a relationship with her, that 20-year-old, and the 17 and 15 and probably 9-year-old too inside of me. But really, I would just want to give her permission first that she's worthy without proving anything. You absolutely have nothing to prove. Nothing. There's no 3 lines on a business card or initials that you need to gain as a physical therapist. to be worthy, right? You are there. And the other thing, I would just want to really wrap my arms around her and give her a good squeeze and teach her how to listen to her body, elevate that volume of that, her body literacy more than the pressures and expectations from outside that she puts on herself.
Such great advice. I love it. I don't think we've had someone say you have nothing to prove. And I think that's great advice. So, Crystal, thank you so much for coming on. And everyone, will have links to Crystal's podcast, all of her social media, and also to her free giveaway. Thank you very much for that. How to run your day without it running you. And again, whatever podcast platform you're listening on, you can go on and click onto that and get all of the goodies that Crystal's giving you. And when is the book coming out so people can expect it? Do you have a date?
It's going to be in the fall.
In the fall.
So,
perfect.
Yep, hopefully by the end of November. Yep.
Perfect. All right. So we will be on the lookout for that as well. So Crystal, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you, all the listeners.
Yeah. And to all the listeners, thank you. Have a great couple of days and stay healthy, wealthy, and smart.